All right, so we are talking about cell membrane potentials. Nervous system. Yesterday we went through the anatomy, right? How nerves work. That you have these receivers of signals. What do we call those? The things, on the actual neuron itself. The dendrites are getting signals, right? And they pass them down to what? The axons, which would then carry that signal to another nerve or to a muscle, right? At the neuromuscular junction, right? At the synapse between a muscle and a nerve. Or they're transferring it to a gland, or they're getting the stimulation from the skin when you touch the table, right? They're carrying these impulses, either up to the brain, sensory, or down from the brain, motor. So boy, is it really bright in here. And we want to talk about how that works. That is the key for today. How that works. And it begins with this potential. Because cell membranes on a nerve are polarized. What does polarized mean? Okay, so that's even very specific. Yeah, and in this case, there is more negative charge on the inside than there is on the outside. So there's poles, right? Think of our planet, North Pole, South Pole, right? Think of a battery, positive pole, negative pole. It's the same kind of thing. There's polarization there. And we've got negative charge on the inside of this nerve. And it is that polarization that helps us with this conduction. So again, here is the cell membrane. Remember, it's that phospholipid bilayer. Remember back to our tissue section. And there are these gates, these proteins that act as gates that will allow different atoms, different ions to move back and forth. So, the potassium ions will pass through the membranes easier than the sodiums. So that means potassium is one of the major contributors to us having this more positive outside, more negative on the inside. We cool? So resting potential. So that's just your generalized piece about potential. Now let's talk about resting. Resting means nothing is happening yet, right? The muscle's not firing, it's just chilling. Like we all wish we were doing right now. Right? A couple of days. You'll get there. Okay? So due to active transport, remember back to our cell movements? The cell is actively moving these ions in and out of the cell. And so there ends up being a greater concentration of sodium outside and a greater concentration of potassium inside. You with me? So, yes, please. Okay. Inside of the membrane has an excess negative, or outside is more positive. And this separation is what we call a resting potential. That there's more negative inside, more positive outside. There's a lovely picture that's giving you some ideals about this that is there on page 235. This is kind of where we're going, talking about how these guys work. We're good so far? Yes, ma'am. If you must. Here's that picture there, showing on the outside more positive, on the inside more negative, right? We're good so far? Sure. That the resting is just the fact that there is this potential present, more negative on the inside, more positive on the outside. Okay? Now notice that sodium and potassium are both positive ions, right? You remember this from chemistry. They're both positive ions. It's just because we've got more in one place than the other, that's what gives us this positive or negative. There's more on the outside than there are on the inside, so it gives it an overall negative inside, right? The impulse is the thing actually going down the nerve, down the axon. The action potential is what causes that. Mm-hmm. To carrying that all the way down the nerve. Yep. All right, let's keep going. By the way, that charge, if we were to actually measure the charge inside of a neuron, it would be negative 70 millivolts, which is, again, just giving you a number to show how negative it is. All right, let's keep going. So, when a neuron is stimulated, that will affect this resting potential. Are you with me? The nerve becomes less negative on the inside, so it is now depolarized. Right? It was a polarized membrane, right? Positives here, negatives here. But now we're bringing those positives in, right? So it becomes less negative on the inside. So now it's become depolarized. It's no longer a positive-negative kind of relationship. Does this make sense? And if you get enough depolarization, if enough positives come in, then we reach what we call the threshold potential. And once you reach threshold, now those gates open up, and now it's going to depolarize completely. Think of it this way. Your mother has been telling you for weeks to clean your room, right? And you have to pause on that because I got to answer this telephone. Okay, sorry, back to our potentials. Your mother has told you to clean your room, right? And she tells you once. You don't do it, Hector. She tells you twice. You don't do it, Favor. Come on, you got to take care of this room, right? Finally, she says, Daisy, I'm going to take that phone away if you don't take care of your room. Ooh. Now we've reached the threshold, right? We're saying, oh, okay, now I'm actually going to do it because there's going to be some consequences, right? Obviously, these three people would never do that. The first time their parents asked them to do something, they take care of it. I understand perfectly. But do you understand? There's a threshold that you don't actually do something. There's no action unless you get over that threshold, right? Are you with me? And these nerves are the same way. At the threshold, that's where we call an action potential. It's actually given this nerve enough stimulation that it will actually fire. And that action potential will then make the whole nerve depolarize to send the signal down the axon. I'm sorry?
Why does that have to depolarize?
Because that's basically what sends the signal, is the depolarization of one part, again, where the axon and the dendrite meet. Where those depolarize, that then continues down like a cascade, a wave, through the whole nerve. Depolarizing is went from having positive outside and negative inside to switching, basically. You lose that polarization. That's what we were just talking about. We'll talk about that in a moment here. Yep. Okay. So once you get that threshold, suddenly these sodium can come rushing in. Those gates, they open up, and it allows those sodium ions to come rushing into the nerve. And again, those are positive, right? The inside was negative, remember, negative 70 millivolts? Now I've got all these positives rushing in. So as they keep coming in, that charge changes, right? It was at negative 70, now it keeps getting more and more positive. So it goes to negative 55, and then negative 30, and negative 20. It can even go up as high, that action potential could take it up to a positive 20. Are y'all with me? It was negative 70, now it's all the way up to positive 20, because so many of these sodiums have come in. Are we good? It was negative, now it's positive. At the same time that that's happening, okay? And again, think of it this way. Sophie is my dendrite at the very end, right? So I am another axon from another neuron telling her, hey, Sophie, contract, right? So where she is, that's enough of a threshold to get her to do what she needs to do, right? So again, those gates are for her, they open up, the sodiums come in, she depolarizes, right? Now, Sonali is paying close attention. to Sophie. Like, that's her whole job, is to watch. And if Sophie depolarizes, she depolarizes. Because she's a follower like that. You know, that's just how she does it. No, I'm kidding. Right? But Ryan is watching her. And are you comfortable? Everybody is watching the piece next to it. So when Sophie, who again is driving this whole boat here, when she depolarizes, right, you'll depolarize, and you'll depolarize, and you just keep going down the line all the way till we get way over here to Mia. She's the very end of our axon, attached to another nerve. Does that make sense? Each neuron. Each neuron. Each piece, like starting at the very top, where they're connected, that's where it depolarizes, and it sends it, if you reach that threshold, it sends it all the way down, the entire neuron.
So the neuron is the individual thing within the...
Yep.
So you're saying we were just one neuron?
You were one neuron, this whole piece. Yep. So while, let's say, Rachel is now realizing, oh, wait, Elena's depolarizing, I need to depolarize, right? While that process is happening, Sophia is already resetting. In case I say to her, hey, contract again, right? She can't wait until it gets all the way to Mia before she resets. She's got to be ready sooner than that. So very quickly, we start to do this repolarization, right? Where they'll pump out those potassiums and get them back to that resting potential. So that very quickly, Sophia can say, hey, Sonali, fire again. They want us to do it again. And she gets the wave going again.
So all of them are like immediately...
Once they depolarize, they immediately want to get back to their reset position. They want to repolarize back to that negative 70 piece. Because again, the point is, your muscle doesn't just say fire once and it goes fire and then stops. Right? It's doing something. The nerve is sending a signal that wants to continue. Okay? And again, we're using active transport, we're using pumps, we're resetting that nerve back to that resting potential. So here's a diagram piece that shows that. This is in your textbook there on page 238. So here's my resting potential up on top, right? Notice the charge, negative 70. The threshold stimulus has come. Again, I have said to Sophie, contract, move, go, right? And so notice that she starts becoming much more positive, right? These sodiums come rushing in. So the inside becomes much more positive. Do you see how high it goes? Way up here into that positive 20 or positive 30 range, right? But then very quickly, again, that signal is being sent down the nerve, or down the neuron. Very quickly, it repolarizes back to its negative 70 piece. That's a great question. It's in the milliseconds. It's very quick. It's very quick. Again, the point being so that the nerve can keep getting those stimuli. It's a good question. If you look there on page 238, excuse me, on page 238 in your textbook, there's a table, table 9.1, that gives you this process of conduction in kind of a step-by-step table there. It's a good summary of understanding how these nerve conductions work, what pieces are involved. Receiving the threshold stimulus, once it's at resting potential, the sodium channels opening, sodium coming in, potassium channels opening, the potassium's moving to reset back to our resting potential. Sir? Yes, exactly. Remember, dendrite receives signal, axon sends signal. I am, yes, I am. Are you with me, my friends? Sir?
When it's repolarizing, why is the potassium coming out?
So you're right. You notice, right, that we started out with the sodiums outside and the potassiums inside, and then when it's repolarizing, it kind of switches, right? Remember, they're both positive ions, right? So it will eventually get back to this homeostasis if the nerve doesn't keep firing. But otherwise, it can just then reverse that, right? That these purple ones on the outside, the potassiums can then come in to depolarize just like the sodiums did before. It's a reversible process.
Then why isn't it positive 20 all the time?
Because there's more on the outside than there is on the inside. There's more positives on the outside than the inside. Right, for that repolarization phase. With the repolarization, it's going to get, because you notice the potassiums go out, right? Its resting spot is with the sodiums more outside, the potassiums more inside. But if you have to fire again, it can do it with the other way. Are you with me, friends? Again, this is a key point, knowing how these nerves work. Sir? There are. And there are pumps as well.
And they look the exact same as
Sure. The same ideal. Yes, sir. Okay. This nerve impulse, right? The impulse is simply this action potential being conducted down the entire length of the neuron. So what we call it when she triggers her and she triggers him and he triggers her and all the way down, right? That is what we call an action potential, a nerve impulse. And in the large scale, that's how the signal gets sent from your brain down to your finger, right? That each new depolarization causes that to go all the way down that neuron. And again, they're showing you kind of the same view. Think of this now being a nerve instead of just a neuron. That same thing. Positive more outside, more negative on the inside. When it depolarizes, those positives rush in. And so Sonali says, ooh, well, I want to be positive too. And so she depolarizes. And then Ryan, I want to be depolarized too. So he depolarizes. And it keeps going all the way down. And then quickly, what does it do? Repolarizes. Gets back to its resting potential. So that way it can be stimulated again. We talked a little bit about those nodes of Ranvier yesterday. Remember the myelin sheaths that cover the axon? And how those myelinated nerves, how they conduct, is what we call saltatory conduction. That it literally jumps from one node to the next. Rather than, so it would be like this. It would be like Sophie depolarizing and the signal jumping over here to Rachel. It didn't have to go through these three slowpokes. It just jumped right to her. And then it jumps from her all the way over to Neha, and then to Nels, and then to Jordan, and then to Mia. So we've only had to do 6 different spots instead of 30. So are you comfortable that's faster? It's just simply speed. Just simply speed. So we can get that thing depolarized even faster. And again, that's on the myelinated. If they're unmyelinated, it's got to go through every one of you to get that signal all the way to Mia. Many times faster. Please. That's a good question. Again, remember that it's going through those different nodes, and those nodes really don't change. So it really is, like we're basically saying that these 3 are covered with myelin, and then this spot is uncovered. So it would just keep going to those specific spots. Yeah, good question. Are you with me, friends? And nerves are just like muscles, that they're all or nothing, right? Though muscles don't fire every fiber every time, like when I ask Ryan to bend his arm up like this, he doesn't fire every single fiber of his biceps. No, right? You've done that lifting the milk out of the refrigerator, and it's emptier than you thought. When you bang it, that's what I always do. Bang! Oh, Alex did. No. Does that make sense? So we don't fire them all every time. You control it. Nerves, though, as soon as Sophia depolarizes, Ansel has no choice. He must depolarize. You with me? It's all or nothing. If Sophie finally reaches threshold, it's going to be sent the whole way down. Josh can say, you know, I'd rather just not contract today. I'm just going to stay here and not. No. He has to. There's no choice that he has. It doesn't. Okay, let's say somebody came and snipped the nerve right here. Okay, yes, the signal would go to him and it would stop. But that's what we call paralysis. Because the nerve now can't get the signal to where it's going. Are you with me, my friends? Okay. Whew. All right, I'm going to pause here. Actually, I'm going to stop as far as my lecture piece goes here.